Hi, this is Zach with Worn&Wound. Today we're taking a look at the Victorinox Alliance Mechanical. This is a watch that they kind of quietly released within the last couple of months. I'm honestly not really sure when. We went to Basel last year and we didn't see this there. So when I saw this pop up on their website, I was really intrigued because it's a little bit different than what Victorinox typically does. It definitely has a much more retro style to it. Definitely speaking, in my opinion, to like early 1950s pre-Explorer bubble backs by Rolex. It has a very similar, look to it and the markers. But then it also mixes in some of the kind of classic Swiss Army sort of military feel. And just makes it a very interesting and just different watch. So yeah, the brand, Swiss-made brand, classic brand. You probably know them very well from both their knives and their watches. They also, their watches in particular kind of hold a good price point. This one coming in at $750. It's powered by an ETA 2824-2 automatic movement. Has a sapphire crystal with a triple anti-reflective coated crystal on it, and actually really works very anti-reflective, as well as a display case back, and just various nice features. So let's take a closer look. The case of the Alliance Mechanical is very simple and straightforward, and a nice kind of medium small size, though perhaps a little large for a watch this style, but we'll talk about that more later. So it measures 40 millimeters in diameter, 50 millimeters lug to lug with a 20 millimeter lug width, and it's about 10.5 millimeters thick. So it's actually nice and thin. The design, like I said, it's very simple. It's 100% polished. There's nothing really that stands out in terms of the design. You have slab sides, nice contouring, thick lugs there. Overall, I just think it has a nice kind of middle, masculine, everything's a little bit beefy, but not too beefy. I think there's definitely a bit of a touch of dressiness coming from the full polish, as well as from the retro dial design going on. Looking at it from the side, the only kind of interesting thing I think is actually how flat it almost is. You look, the lugs here, they don't really drop down very far. It stays on a very even plane, and I think it fits well, which we'll see on the wrist. Coming off at 3, you have a crown. It doesn't screw down, unfortunately. It's a nice size, though. It's easy to manipulate, but there's just, nothing really special there. It does have a Swiss Army Shields logo there. Flipping it over and opening it up, you might be able to see quickly here that there is a display case back showing off the 2824-2 movement. It isn't very decorated. It just has a logo on the rotor there. Then there's various details around the edge. The dial of the Alliance Mechanical is really where this feels different from your typical Victorinox watch. It's definitely much more retro styled. It has an Explorer dial, meaning that there's a 369 numerals. Typically with Victorinox you find kind of strictly military looking watches, field watches, even if they're vintage, feeling that they're vintage infantry, is very clearly a World War II field watch design. But this really speaks more to vintage sport, vintage dress watches. Specifically, as I said, like early 1950s Rolex bubble back, kind of pre-Explorer watches had almost the exact same markers on them. And it's a very interesting look, and it's just a departure from the brand. It's nice to see them try something different. So there's 2 different colors of this watch you can get. There's this kind of creamy pearlescent color we have here, and then a black. I think they list this as just white, but it's definitely more interesting than a white. It's a little bit off-white. On the chapter ring here, there's a little bit of an iridescence to it, so it has some nice depth to it, and it's just much more interesting looking. Then as you with the main index here, you have applied indices. You have these kind of like faceted shark tooth almost looking steel indices everywhere except for the 369, in which you have very clear sans serif numerals. It's a very nice, easy index to read, and it really, really is vintage looking. But because of the larger watch size, things are a little bit more spread out. There's a little bit of space around everything. This is where I almost wish that the watch was a little bit smaller. They almost could have made it, a 38, kept the numerals and everything the same size, and just kind of eaten up that space a little. It just feels a little bit open to me. But they did do some things to kind of counteract that. And one of the neatest details of this watch is this blind debossed 24-hour index that is inside. Might be a little hard to see, but essentially there's like just a textural no ink index here. It goes from 14 to 17 here, and then 19 to 22 here. So it gives you this, a little bit of a 24-hour track. Obviously, it's very difficult to see in some lighting, but in bright lighting, you can see it clearly. And then it just kind of eats up some of this empty space that's in there. Above 6, you have a date window. I like that they did a 6 o'clock date window if they had to do a date window, but I do think it is kind of pushing in on the 6 a little bit. It feels just a little bit tight in there. But, like I said, they probably had to implement that. They wanted to do it just to make the watch more functional. And in that case, I think that is the best place for it on this watch. Above that, you have automatic in red. I like that there's a drop of red on the dial. Obviously, there's also the red second hand here, but it just adds a little bit of color. Also, just feels a little bit more interesting. At 12, you have a Victorinox Shield logo for the 12th marker, and then under that, the Victorinox Swiss Army text. I like that. And once again, if you look at those Rolexes, they would have had the Rolex crown there, so it really does feel like that watch in many ways. Looking at the hands now, you have these sharp index hands that I actually have a watch from the 50s. Those are spot on to what is on that watch. They have a very narrow strip of lume in the center. They work very well with what's around that. They just feel very appropriate. And then you have their more modern second hand here, the stick second with sort of the Swiss Army knife handle counterweight on it. We've seen this on other watches that they've done. It's kind of a theme, like a trend in the line. And I like that it just ties in with their branding, but still looks appropriate. On the wrist, the Victorinox Alliance wears very nicely. It's a nicely medium-sized sport watch. It actually really feels like a sport watch. Like I said, the case has thick elements to it, like the lugs and this bezel here. So it has a nice mass to it, and that's kind of contrasted by the more kind of dressy and retro-looking dial. So you have an interesting mix of things, and I think that's probably what they were going for, is a substantial day-to-day wear sport watch, a touch of military influence on it, but one that looks a little bit more formal, a little bit more retro. So it's just like a business casual sport watch. And in that, I think it's an achievement, and it's just very different looking from what they normally have, and I quite like that. It's a different and interesting direction, and it's handsome. I think that this is a very easy watch to wear anywhere you go, and I think you can obviously dress it up, dress it down with your strap option. It comes with this black leather strap, kind of very simple leather strap. It does have a deploying clasp, and this is one of those kind of strange styled deployants where it comes through the opposite way. So typically the tail's going out that way, and here it's coming out this way. And that makes it very easy to kind of open and close. You don't have to like futz around with two sides. But it is a little strange having it come off that side. And from a practical standpoint, I've actually found it catching on things like a headphone wire and such, because typically it's on the outside, so you don't have to worry about your wrist when you walk. But it's not a bad strap, though. It's kind of an interesting sporty take. I think this watch would look absolutely stellar on like a brown croc or something like that, which would just be a little bit more vintage, a little bit more casual looking. To wrap up, the Victorinox Alliance Mechanical is it's a very cool new watch from the brand that like I said, I was kind of surprised to see it, and I still am a bit. I mean, I think it's a bit of a departure from what they typically do, and in that is kind of exciting. It's interesting to see perhaps them pursue some watches that are a little bit more stylish, and based a little bit outside of their typical kind of infantry style. Obviously they have dive watches and chronographs that are more intense and whatever, but I haven't seen one with this kind of classic look to it. And I think they did an interesting job. It still feels like a Victorinox, even though it has very clear kind of nods to 50s watches. And then it's a nice modern watch too. At 40 millimeters, it's robust. It's a 100-meter water resistant case. I wish that that could have been 200 with a screw down and something just to make it a little bit more robust and sporty, and just kind of build off of that side a little bit, as it's a bit in between. But for a day-to-day watch, a watch you can wear to the office, this is really nice. It's something you can dress up, dress down, and at $750, I think it's totally in line with their normal pricing, and I think it's a pretty decent price for a Swiss-made watch with an ETA 2824 that's coming out right now, because the prices on everything is going up, especially ones with atom movements in them. So yeah, if you're looking for a sporty watch with a little bit more of a kind of a retro look to it, this is definitely one to check out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how it looks and feels. Please read the full review on Worn&Wound, and check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you.